Hi, Yassine from Change Wealth here to talk to you today about what is a bond in a financial context. So sometimes we'll hear discussion of financial markets, people will talk about stocks and bonds. What is a bond really? Well, very simply, a bond is just a way for governments or companies, corporations, to borrow money. So if you or I were to walk into a bank and want to borrow money, that would be described as taking out a loan. It's just not how it's described in this context. Instead, we'll say that the party that's borrowing money is issuing a bond. So it's a contract. A bond is a contract, and it functions just like an IOU. So think of it like an IOU. A bond is an IOU issued by governments or companies. Could be federal government, municipal, companies of all different sizes. And in this contract, basically I will give up, so let's say I'm the one buying the bond. I will give up some amount of money today. I'm just going to make up this example. But let's say I give the issuer $950 cash today. In return, I'll get an IOU, and generally the amount, what's being promised to me in this IOU is an amount that's actually greater than the $950 that I'm giving up, for example. And let's say in this contract, at the conclusion of the contract, the issuer is promising to pay me $1,000 instead of the $950 that I'm giving up. That's the basic structure of a bond. Now there can be some interest payments that the issuer has to make to me between now and the eventual conclusion of the contract. There's a number of different ways these things can be structured, but this is the general idea. There's some terminology you should be aware of. So one word that'll come up is the principal. Bonds aren't generally described by way of how much money I'm giving up today. Rather, they're generally described in terms of how much money is due to the investor later, right? So this $1,000 in this example is called the principal, sometimes called the face amount, and that's usually how the amount of the bond is described. Here I wrote later because bonds can be of varying durations from anywhere from sort of several months up to like 30 years. But whatever the expiry date of that contract is, has a special name. It's called the bond's maturity date. So if you hear that word, that's all that that's talking about. And then the yield is a measure of the amount of interest that I, as the investor, am earning on the bond, right? So some contracts will be simple like this. I give up an amount today, I get a single amount back later. Other bonds may be, I give up a certain amount now and I'm getting some small interest payments between now and maturity, and then a big sort of lump sum payment at maturity. The yield will be a measure of the overall sort of gain, I guess. It will reflect the overall gain that I'm making as the investor for the service of lending this money to the corporation. There's some details there that aren't particularly important for our purposes here right now, but that's generally it. The yield is a measure of how much interest is associated with this contract, okay? So yeah, that's the basic structure of what a bond is, an IOU issued by governments or companies. Hopefully this was helpful, and we'll get into more detail on some of this stuff another day. Thanks, talk to you next time.